it's not maybe, you know, as nice as of the environments, but it's cool. It has like 14 degrees Celsius constantly, whatever the time is outside, and it's super big, so it has a lot of it has light. It's not like a dark one. So that's the escape during the August month for us. You know, if we want to, because it's about 35 degrees here in even more Celsius. I don't know how much is that in Fahrenheit.
Yeah, it was 25 degrees Celsius here today in the valley.
Wow. Yeah, here is like 35, I think. So yeah, 95 Fahrenheit. So you can't really go like climbing.
No, but the cave sounds great.
Yeah. So that's like it's actually near the biggest climbing area here in Croatia called Paklenica Gorge. I don't know if you heard about it.
No, I haven't had a chance to explore that coast, but love to. I'm going to be in Sardinia this fall, and I just love the Mediterranean.
Oh, nice. You know,
climate
we're
area.
preparing a webinar on sailing and climbing in Sardinia.
Great.
So
with Lorenzo.
Yeah. So we are. So you thank you for the connection. Yeah, sorry.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's going to be cool as well. All right, let's see. Okay, we have a few more minutes. Let's see. Oh, we already have like 35 people waiting. Maybe people can let us know. You have the chat below on the toolbar. Maybe you can let us know where are you connecting from, and I'll start. So we have like Mark. Where you are originally from in the States?
Oh, I grew up just south of Boston, down by the coast, in a place called Hanson, right next to Plymouth, Mass.
And you're now in Sham, right?
I'm in Chamonix, and I have a house in Vermont, so I come over to the Alps for my Alpine climbing season and for my ski touring season in the spring.
Nice. We already have people from Sweden, Germany, Denmark, UK, France, Belgium, Slovakia. So a lot of people from Europe. We often have a lot of US people.
Yeah.
We are a US based company, but we are starting to market in Europe as well, and it's nice to see it works.
Good.
with people.
Yeah, most of the folks I climb with are from the UK and Scandinavian countries.
Oh, and Costa is asking why Slovakia? Wow, why I said wow Slovakia? Well, I said wow because there is a lot of different countries, and I think we probably have seen Slovakia written for the first time. So maybe that's why. But I'm happy that people connect from all over the world, basically, but Europe and the States mainly. We also have some people from Poland, Utah, Alberta, even Dublin, Surrey. So quite cool.
What about Vermont?
I am checking. I don't know if you market this in your home area, but I don't see it. I mean, we might have some people. So we are up to 70 people. So hopefully we can go to the we can cross the 100. You know, we love to start the webinars at like a good number. So it's like across the 100. Okay, let's do it then. But we'll give it a few more minutes. Usually people start connecting around 7. So that's like now. We usually give a minute or two for people to connect and then start with the show. And I'm super happy that that Jeff Witt connected us with you, Mark. I mean, seeing the practice run, I think this is going to be great. And we did really a few good ones with him before on Sham and in general and Eiger. And I'm looking forward to this one as well.
Well, you know, it should be a hoot considering I'm not a photographer. And, you know, I'm not big into speaking into computers. I'm much more of an orator, you know, so this should be fun. This is my first time speaking in front of a computer.
Well,
so bear with me.
No worries. I think it's going to be great because we started doing this last year during COVID, you know, when in March everything stopped, and then we just like gathered our heads and thought like, okay, what could we do? And we came up with this idea of doing like webinars on with you guys, and I think it's a great thing, so people can hear some local stuff. And I know it's a bit weird to talk into the computer. Usually you would talk with a friend over maybe a beer or something like that and tell them all about your recent climb. But I think this format works fine as well. All right, we are exactly at 100, and with some people joining, but I think we can officially start. So hi everyone, thank you much for joining. And as always, it's super wonderful for me to see so many people here. It's at 105 and going up. My name is Perica. I'm co-founder of the 57 Hours company, and we are a platform that connects basically people who love outdoor sports with certified guides and guided outdoor adventures. And today we are presenting yet another one of our epic adventure webinars. I think it's at our 20th or even a bit more. So going quite well with IFMGA mountain guide Mark Puleio. Hope I said your name correctly.
Yes, perfect.
And he will share tales from ascending Mont Blanc over his 30-year climbing career. And I think what you said, around 50 Mont Blanc ascents so far, which is like, I think you're probably the best person to share this story. So, and Mark will offer invaluable advice on how to like basically elevate your experience in and around Chamonix and in ascending Mont Blanc. So please use the chat below on the toolbar to connect with one another. But there is also a Q&A section that you'll see as well. Please leave your questions for Mark in the Q&A section. And once his presentation is over, we'll make sure we answer as much questions as we can. So bear with us and just leave the question and we'll answer it. And other than that, if some of your friends want to watch this, the webinar is being recorded and will be published on our YouTube in, I think, a day or two. And you'll all get the email with the recording. So no worries if you or your friends miss the show, it will be available on YouTube. But enough talking from me. Let's get to the reason why we are here, which is to talk about climbing the Mont Blanc. I'll let Mark tell you a little bit more about himself and continue with his presentation. After that, we'll follow up with the Q&A to answer questions from you guys. And of course, we'll highlight Mark's guided trips in Chamonix this season as well. Mark, the stage is yours.
Great. Hey, thank you so much. I just wanted to say a quick thanks to 57 Hours Adventures and to Perica and Maya for making this happen. Really appreciate it. And yeah, to everyone who's shown interest in wanting to explore what it means to climb Mont Blanc. I think if you're here, then, you know, there once was a dream that was Chamonix, right? It could only be whispered, right? Anything more than a whisper and it would vanish because it's so fragile, right? The classic Marcus Aurelius quote from The Gladiator. And I think that that's what Chamonix means to a lot of people, is this aura, this mystique, and the Mont Blanc being the highest, you know, gem in the whole range. Everyone wants to come climb it. It's absolutely gorgeous from the Chamonix Valley or from the Val d'Aosta. So yeah, welcome to our webinar. And I'm looking forward to giving you a nice visual presentation of what it means to come to Chamonix and to climb the classic route and to have some acclimatization and some instructional warm-up climbs as well. Let's see. So I can't flip my screen. Someone's probably laughing at me, I'm sure, but I can't change my slide. There we go. So yeah, you know, Perica mentioned I'm a mountain guide, and yeah, absolutely the most classic thing you can think of when you talk about mountain guides is like, how do you know if there's a mountain guide at a party? Yeah, they'll definitely let you know, right? So it's important when you come to Chamonix that you find yourself a licensed mountain guide that has some experience in the range, but is working legally in these mountains with the appropriate insurance and everything like that. And we'll talk more about what that means at the end when we talk about hiring a mountain guide. So what we're going to do tonight is talk about a little bit of the history and the birth of alpinism, as well as the guiding industry. We're celebrating the 200th year anniversary of the guides in Chamonix. So that's a big historical event for sure. And we're going to talk about what type of opportunities are available for everyone, all different types of abilities for sure. It's literally Chamonix has everything to offer, from hill walkers till extreme climbing. So we can talk about some ways to prepare. And then what we'll do is we'll just do a chronological progression of what it looks like to climb up the goad route, which is one of the classic routes that people do on the Mont Blanc. And then we can get a little bit more into what it looks like hiring a guide and some recommendations on what to look for when you start communicating with people to have an adventure here in the Alps. And then I believe we'll touch base on the questions that have developed in the chat box downstairs at the end.
All right, Mark.
Yeah. So guys, every time I go to do it, there we go. This is what people think about when they think Chamonix. They think this big, massive Alpine climbing. Here is a great example of probably the most climbed route in the Alps. It's called the Cosmique Arête, Arête des Cosmiques, and it's just a great outing for folks to have to get their big toe wet and what it's like to be up in the Mont Blanc Massif. In the background here, you can see some of the Massif that we'll talk about. I like to divide up the Val d'Arve. You can see down here is the river down there is the Arve River, and that's the village of Chamonix. And on that south side of the valley there, we have our Mont Blanc Massif, and the Aiguille de Chamonix are all those rocky peaks that you can see. The middle peak here is the famous lift goes to the top of there from the mid station called the Aiguille de Midi. And when you talk about the Mont Blanc, you talk about a massif. And we have ourselves, these are the four main peaks of the Mont Blanc Massif. The Mont Blanc de Tacoul is right here. The Maudit is right here. The actual summit of the Blanc is back here. And this is the Dôme des Gouttes. On this side of the river, we're climbing in what's called the Aiguille Rouge. If people come, I highly recommend you do 3 one-day trips where you try to sleep up high at a mountain hut and experience 3 different types of, alpine or rock climbing, or alpine rock climbing, or glacial travel that we'll look at for 3 days. Or you go and do a 3-day trip where you spend 2 nights up high as well. Either way, the objective is to spend 3 days getting to know your guide, getting to know how the rope works and all that stuff, and as well as sleeping high, climbing higher, getting acclimated so that you're going to be able to be fit and strong and have a good day on the Mont Blanc. Another great thing to do is we can ride the famous train that was built in the late 1800s. The Mer de Glace is an incredible ice flow that comes down, and we can take the Montanvers train up there. And then we can utilize this zone of ablation where most of the snow melts during the summer, as opposed to where it accumulates up high. So here it's all ice during the summer, and it has these beautiful spots to be able to teach crampon and ice axe techniques, and getting a little bit of vertical ice climbing here as well. It's a gorgeous moulin down there. You can see where a river in the glacier has kind of made a corkscrew and eroded it out over the years, ground it down. So sometimes we head up there, up to the Mer de Glace. This is a great shot. You can see the Aiguille de Midi from the other side. There's some fabulous rock climbing on the golden granite here. This is the Cosmique Arête that we saw earlier. The Arête de Laurence up to the Cosmique Hut. This is collectively what they call the Vallée Blanche, which is a collection of a whole bunch of glaciers that come in from Italy and France and all merge and eventually merge down into the Le Chaux and form that mer de glace that we saw. These are some satellite peaks of the Mont Blanc range. And this is the Tacul de Mont Blanc that we saw the other side that was heavily glaciated because it's on the north side of the mountain, this being more of the east and southeast. So glacier walks are a super fun way to get up high. You know, families often enjoy these. If you're doing Mont Blanc and have your wife and kids or other people here that don't want to climb Mont Blanc, then you can certainly go up and have some adventures with them as well and keep it simple. You know, a lovely 3-day tour that we often do out of Chamonix is heading over to Switzerland. Utilizes 2 nice huts up in the Albert Premier. You can cross this Trion Plateau here and sleep at a nice cabin on the other side, just below the sun. You know, both of them allow you to be able to sleep high, but then get used to being able to working together as a team, working on the rope, getting used to your crampons and gaining some elevation by climbing a couple peaks. This is on the way to the Aiguille Tour, just to get a little more elevation, which often involves some rock scrambling and people needing to get used to using crampons. Oftentimes if we have snow or ice and rock, we just keep the crampons on the whole time. And a lot of people aren't used to that unless you spent time in the Alps. So it's good to put some mileage in before you head on to Mont Blanc. So we try to pick those peaks if people need that experience. If people come and they're like, I got to climb some beautiful granite. I hear there's amazing golden granite. So this is on the satellite peaks. This is on the this is the Petit Capucine and the Roy Siam route on the Pic at Alfray, where you do a glacial approach, leave your crampons and boots at the base, and you climb technical rock to the top and rappel back down. That's a great way to get up high. You know, we talked about the glacial tours. Oftentimes people, oh, it looks pretty mellow. We know what we're doing on the glacier and whatnot. The Vallée Blanche in the area from the Aiguille de Midi or the Skyway on the Italian side is heavily crevassed and definitely gets worse during the summer and later in the day. So I think it's just another reason to, if you're going to go wandering around out on the glaciers, this is a great example of why you want to hire a guide. So those are all crevasses, which you can see where the white snow is as opposed to the darker snow. And oftentimes in those depressions is where it's sagging down a little bit. So you wouldn't want to go walking through those zones because it could be just a half a meter of snow that collapses and you fall into a, you know, a 30 meter or more depth of a crevasse. So definitely need to be using the rope and thinking about hiring a guide if you're not comfortable in that terrain. So if you want to get up high off the glacier, there's a couple great options. This is up on the Dent Géant. The photo on the right is really indicative of most of the classic routes you hear of in the Alps that are AD plus type routes that you know the names of. They're often equipped. So this is on the Dent up on the slabs and it's fixed with ship ropes that's really thick enough that it's comfortable on your hands. So you can just grab onto them and put your feet on the wall and yard yourself up. Yeah, it's not really climbing. And you can definitely climb this in rock shoes and in boots, and it has plenty of gear, which is a great option as well. So you can challenge by choice again. Lots of guides like to use the fixed ropes because one of the biggest hazards on this is the electricity. The Dent sticks up really high in the range and can be a complete lightning rod. So it's important to get up and down it quick. So we have to just use the ropes and yard on them. And that's topping out on the left side there. And I'm just going to interrupt for a minute to say every time I try to move my slide, it's with a different command. So
can't you
I'm
use
not
the
sure
left
why
and
that
right
is.
arrow? Doesn't work?
No, it's not.
Oh, I don't know if you want to But what do you have? You have to go with the mouse and do the left, right, or?
Now it's working.
Okay.
Great. Let me get back. Sorry, folks. That's what happens when you put a non-millennium in charge of this slideshow thing.
No worries, Mark. No worries. And I didn't know that about electricity on the ropes.
On the dent, it's a lightning rod of the range, and you got to just get up and down it. So there's no, faffing about when you go do a route like that.
Oh,
And I
well.
think that's important to realize when your guide is, on a route like that, they're trying to use their timing and their pace to try to mitigate those hazards, because time's often the biggest hazard in the mountains that people don't recognize. So come and really being efficient at putting on layers or taking off your coat and putting it on, and the pack on and off, because all those little 2 and 3 minute things add up. So lots of times on a route like that, your guide's going to kind of be moving with a sense of urgency and wanting to get it done. So oftentimes you have to kind of follow their lead, because we like to be casual and mellow when we can be, but then when we got to go, we all just got to go. So the dent's like a big objective. Over in the Aiguille Rouge, sometimes if the weather's bad, we can still get people out moving around on alpine rock ridges, and perhaps getting themselves into what it feels like to be in boots and crampons on rock and snow again. This is perhaps one of my favorite warm-up climbs on the Entreves Traverse, the Aiguille d'Entreves. You can see the gorgeous Aiguille Noire in the background there, on the Puleio Aiguille Blanche in the back that head on up to the Mont Blanc. And that's the longest ridge in the Alps, the Puleio Integrale. It comes up out of the Val Veni to the summit. And when we do a day like on the Entreves, it's just all about like learning to move together and understanding how the rope works when the guides are using different techniques, and transitioning from being long lining on the glacier to short roping on the ridges, or short pitching where it's a little bit steep and harder, and trying to keep it flowing. So great training grounds. Oftentimes these are objectives that in the end, the folks that came and climbed Mont Blanc was like, oh, Mont Blanc was amazing. But that thing we did on that rock bridge, that thing blew my mind. So sometimes people end up getting an experience they didn't quite know they were going to get, because they get so focused on the Blanc. This is an extension of the Entreves, which I like to do with people. We can go right on all the way up over the Toul here, and then down in the back here. This is the Denta Gigante, and that's the lightning rod that I was talking about. So oftentimes we like to get up this ridge and over here and up and down that as quick as possible. It's a great view just to show you the Entreves is truly the right along the border of Italy and France. So this is down in the Val d'Aosta, in the village of, you have Courmayeur, and down, extended down here is the Aosta, the Val d'Aosta. And out back here, you have the highest peak in Italy, the Gran Paradiso, which is right over here. And a lot happened on that borderline during the wars, a whole bunch of history that's interesting to think about. And yeah, these are more technical stuff, doing the Aiguille Rochefort up to the Dome Rochefort on the right, and the Pain out of the mid station at the Midi. These are much harder climbs that involve a little bit of fifth class climbing, as well as short roping on ridges. So it's just kind of bumping it up. This is the Tour Ronde, which is it's kind of gotten a lot more loose in years. So having this snow right now that we're having will make routes like this be a little bit more in condition for longer. That's the gorgeous view of the Mont Blanc in the back. And from this angle, you can see one of the peaks we saw from the other side is the Maudit, the Mont Blanc, and the Tacoul would be over here. And that's the Blanc, but this is Courmayeur de Mont Blanc, which is just a few meters lower than the 4810 of Mont Blanc. Over maps over the years have shifted the border of where Italy and where France is to include, like older maps include the highest point in Italy, but now it's in France. So it's always been kind of disputed, as well as the elevation. Some maps show 48 07, 4808. So that's interesting. This is the Gran Paradiso, and it's the highest peak in Italy. If you don't do a whole bunch of warm-up climbs in the Chamonix, out of the Chamonix Valley, doing those one-day trips from a hut like the Torino or the Planighi hut, then you can come over to a really gorgeous park and spend 3 days climbing up in this amazing valley and staying at gorgeous huts with super good food at the Refugio Chabot. And then doing what's more like a real feel of your fitness, because the summit day from the Chabot to the summit of the Paradiso is a good 1,100 odd meters, which is more in line with what the summit day of the Blanc is. It's just over 4,000 meters, 4,061 meters. It's a glacial climb that has a little rock scramble at the top, which is always super fun. This is my family at the top of the Gran Paradiso last summer. We took advantage of the COVID time and not having a lot of work and less people in the mountains. So that was pretty fun to get the whole team up there.
Nice.
They got the Virgin statue.
It's nice to see that picture with all of you on top.
Yeah, pure mountain stoke right there. So that's all kind of like the precursor. Oftentimes you contact a guide and you say, oh, I want to climb Mont Blanc. And they're like, oh, what have you done? And maybe we should get together and do our acclimatization and then do Mont Blanc. So often Mont Blancs are done in a 6-day program, sometimes a 5-day program. So you utilize the first 3 days of, again, sleeping high, climbing higher for a couple nights, getting to know each other and getting dialed in on your systems. And then you come back down, sleep in the valley, get some, oxygen-rich blood again, and then you start your ascent on the Mont Blanc. What I love about Mont Blanc, personally for me is, well, as a guide, it's hearing everyone's experience about what got them to climb Mont Blanc and why they're there. That's pretty amazing. But then what I really love too is thinking of the history involved here. And Mont Blanc was, first tried to be climbed from the Italian side, from this guy Saucier, who hired guides out of Italy. And I really appreciate that. That was in 1760. And being Sicilian and trying to represent Italy, I'm like, yeah, they tried to climb from the Italian side with the Courmayeur guides first. So that's pretty cool. And then it was Balmet and Picard, Dr. Picard and the crystallologist Balmet that were the first to climb it. And this was in 1786, 10 years after the American Revolution, which is pretty phenomenal when you think about. And then it was in 1823, they did the first guided ascent from Chamonix with the guides from here. So this is why it's the 200th year anniversary. So that's pretty special when you think that you're walking in those footsteps every time you get to go up on the Blanc.
Issues with the slideshow again?
Yep.
Sorry.
So, sorry, I'm not sure if are you switching something over there, or is it all fine?
No. But continue as you can. So sorry to people, but it's a slight glitch. I think we'll get through it. No worries.
That's what it is. The internet here is incredibly slow. So when you leave the valley down in Chamonix, you usually leave, most guided parties are going to utilize a lift system, the Bellevue lift. And the Bellevue lift's going to bring you up to the Col de Chaux and Col de Vosa. And you're going to get on a train. And there's these trains that were built, around 1900, it's like 1906. And he had them built in honor of his 3 children. And this is the one, Anne. So you ride the train up for a good amount of time, and you end up getting out here to start your ascent up the Goûter route on Mont Blanc. When people say, oh, I'm going to go do the normal route on Mont Blanc, it's usually this one. It ascends the Aiguille de Goutte and then the Dôme de Goutte, and then it merges in with some other climbs and continues up the Boss Ridge and the Summit Ridge to the Blanc. So we leave the train station and we are ascending what's called moraine, and it's going to be where the glacier came down and basically pushed off all the debris to the sides or to the end. And it's often loose, and usually there's goat tracks that run through it. So we just kind of meander up these goat tracks for a while. It's a solid 3-hour walk. This is right at the end of the train. There is a hut out here that you can stay at, Refugio for food. This is the Aiguille de Bionnaise and the Bionnaise Glacier coming down. And this is the launching point. And as we ascend up the trail, you get just an amazing view of the Val d'Arve over here and the Aiguille Rouge coming up out. This is the Aiguille de Midi, which is the noonday needle right here. And the Midi Plan and the Aiguille Vert. And you can barely make out here Les Dreux, and right up over this pass here into Switzerland. Sometimes folks show up and they think the mountain huts we're going to stay at are going to be these like really primitive shelters, but in fact they're amazing, almost like hotels really, that have fantastic food, very comfortable place to be able to rest. They're usually off the grid. They're supplied by helicopters. You usually get your dinner and your breakfast and your night, and it's super reasonable. So this is called the Tête Rousse hut. And Tête Rousse is pretty much where most people are going to start from. They're either going to, there's multiple ways to do it. I like to think of it as a chocolate chip cookie. There's tons of recipes. They all taste good. You end up getting what you get based on the hut reservations. The Club Alpine of France, CAF, they basically have a computer system, and you have to be able to get online at the right time and be able to reserve your spot at the huts. So that's one of the most challenging things for guides to negotiate for their folks, is to be able to get the hut reservations. So depending on what you get for reservations kind of dictates your itinerary, believe it or not. Sounds strange, but that's how it goes. So we work with it. Sometimes I go from Tête Rousse to the summit and back to Tête Rousse. Other times you don't go to Tête Rousse and you go to the next hut up, which is called the Goutte hut, to the summit and then back down all the way. So depending on how you slice it dictates how long of an ascent it is from the hut. Right outside the hut here is the little pocket glacier of the Tête Rousse. So we're leaving here at 3,167 meters is what the hut's at. And, you know, I feel like Paritza, I went by some slides. There we go. So outside the back of the hut is what, when people say I'm going to go climb the Goutte route, most people who know about it talk about the Grand Couloir. And there's always this communication going around the valley about what the conditions are like in the Grand Couloir. And a couloir is essentially a corridor of snow between two rock ribs. You can see this rock rib here and this rock rib here. The very top of the Aiguille de Goutte, you can see the old Goutte hut and the new Goutte hut. Some completely different conditions here. You can see on the left, early season, it can be often all snow, and things are pretty good if the temperatures stay cold and there's a good boot track. But then when it transitions and the snow starts to melt and you can get this river kind of flowing down, it can kind of start making some stones fall and whatnot. You can see over on the right here, this is probably August time where it's completely dry. And then you have some, you can see the discoloration here is from some recent rockfall. And when we leave the hut, we head up this little pocket, Tête Rousse Glacier, over this little rock rib. And essentially you have 100 meters that you need to cross through the couloir, where there's definitely the objective hazard of stonefall. You know, in recent years with the freeze and elevation going so high, our isotherm, or where it's 0 degrees C, sometimes has been above the height of the Mont Blanc in recent summers, which makes it so that a lot of the permafrost that can hold these rocks in place is going away. And it gets so bad that sometimes the mayor down in Saint Gervais will shut down the route and not allow people to climb, and they'll put gendarme out there and stop people from going. So if this continues, the rumor is that they're going to try to re-equip this ridge line here. They may have to go up and move a bunch of rock, but put the route here so that people don't have to pass through that couloir. So we'll see if that happens or not. And in that case, they would unequip this, I would hope, to try to keep people from not being under new routers. So when you pass through the couloir, as soon as you go over this rock rib, you just need to carry on and get yourself over to a little bit of a shoulder where it's safe. So there's definitely places you can go in the mountains where you don't stop, and this is one of them. So just keep moving through the couloir. Let's see if we can. There's the pocket rib going up. This is an example of when that river, or it's kind of eroded out. This is a close-up view of that, about 100 meters. You can see the cable running across there. What guides like to do to mitigate this hazard is, aside from, like, I wouldn't be going there if I hadn't have already been watching the weather and make sure that the isotherm is low enough that things are freezing, that there hasn't been any major rock falls, and that we have good weather in the forecast with cold temps. But then once you get there, you've already decided to go there, and you're going to reevaluate. This is an example of a guide who is communicated with someone else who said, hey, can you watch uphill for me? I'll go across and you yell at me if rocks are coming. Because oftentimes the crampon in a crosshair is challenging. The footing can be horrible. Sometimes there's water flowing. Sometimes it's all loose. So it's better off to pay attention to your feet and then ask a person on the sidelines. So you can ask that woman who's sitting there, hey, I'll watch for you if you watch for me. Or if you have guides, we try to team up and do that. So yeah, the cable is something people dispute, to use the cable or not to use the cable. What you can't see in the photo is there's cliffs below. So if you do get taken out a little bit by a rock, maybe you won't be able to stop in time, depends on conditions, before going off the cliff. So some people will utilize the cable and some people won't. It all depends on the time of year and the snowpack and everything in that moment. The best thing to do is just trust your guide and know that it's for them. It's another day of work, and we all want to go home and do what we need to do that afternoon anyway. So we're not going to do anything outrageously crazy. So I'd say just trust your guide and go with it. But some will use it, some won't. It depends. If you do use it and you're a recreationalist and you're not with a guide, just don't do what I've seen people do, where they clip in a tiny sling, like an 80 centimeter sling, and then they get out in the middle and they get boinged off. So then they're free hanging out there because the cable goes away from the footing, from the track when you get to the middle. So they kind of get popped off and then they're swinging around in space. So if you're not with a guide and you're going to use the cable, clip in with a rope that you can give yourself some slack and extend it so that you don't get boinked. So yeah, top tip there. So you get yourself across this couloir, try to utilize other people to help you.
Yeah, some good advice there, Mark. Really good.
Yeah, it's a tough one here. Sorry, guys, I'm so bad at this. Hey, now we're up on the rib. I'm going to show you, this is the Tetrus hut down here, all this zone, and this is that pocket glacier. And we went over the rib, and you can see the people right here. So that's where the cable is. That's the couloir. And you get yourself across there. And when you get in here, there's a little bit of a shoulder by an old ladder. And that's like the only spot I stop in the 680 meters that it is from the Tetrus hut to the top of the ridge. So I'll tell my folks when we leave, let's try to get our layers right, start cool, and we get across the couloir and we get here and it's like, okay, we need some water and change the layer, do it now. And then I just kind of get on the ridge and keep it going. This ridge here is loose. And when you get towards the top of it, people can kick down stones to people in the couloir. So you need to be really careful that as you climb up, you're staying more climbers right than climbers left. People get drifted off to the climbers left over here. And then the fall line of their feet over their loose stone is dropping down. And again, another tip if you're going to be up there without a guide is one of the things that we see often with the non-guided parties is people will have their rope running very long. Guides are going to be 2 meters apart from their clients and their clients from each other. And we're going to move together short roping, maybe some short pitching. But what I see is people running 30 meters of rope out and then it's dangling through loose stone and the rope falls off onto the stone and it kicks the stones down the couloir. So a lot of people actually drop stone onto people that are passing because you can see these 3 people here. And if you're out here, your fall line is right down to them. So just take heed and make your rope short to keep the stone away from people. It's always a debate. Do we leave early at 2 a.m. breakfast or the 4 a.m. breakfast from Tête Rousse? And it's all conditions dependent. It's different every time. You got to play it, read it as you see it. This is leaving probably around 4 a.m. Getting the sunrise. You can see the Aiguille de Bionnaise behind us. And sometimes you're walking on goat trails, super casual, short rope, casual rope mode. And then sometimes you have to turn and face in or turn and face out where it's a little bit steeper. But oftentimes on this 680 meters of scramble, if you trip, it'd be easy to go kind of start cartwheeling down. So if you're not with a guide, again, you want to keep that rope short because you're going to minimize the load on your partners. You won't shock load them. So here you can see the distance in the rope. The woman out front has just gone down a step and she turns and faces in, makes the move, and then we turn and face out and keep motoring. I'm almost thinking there's a delay because of the internet when I push the button. That's it. So, sometimes it's sunny and the next thing you know, it's raining. So this is an example of being on the ridge, cut out, coming down from a summit day. And we had total sunshine about a half hour before, and this storm came in. Luckily, it lasted about 15 minutes. But from my empirical knowledge, information, everything I've seen on this particular spot on the mountain is whenever the clouds come in like this, and you have some precip and wind associated, is oftentimes when the natural rockfall starts. And in the top, there's kind of this little basin above that in the start of that couloir where when the fog comes in or these clouds come in, you can often get rockfall. So be heads up of that. This day, we definitely had rockfall in the couloir, I remember. Which I do have a video of later that we'll get to. So at the very top of the ridge, you've been on this rocky ridge for about 680 odd meters, and you get up to the snow and you have this beautiful new Goutte hut. So this is the new Goutte hut. It was built maybe 2015 or something. Took a couple summers. It's a gorgeous timber frame structure with Streskin panels, that's sheathed on the outside. It's solar and it literally hangs over a 600-meter cliff. It's a pretty sweet spot. My favorite thing about it is that they made a crampon friendly boot room. So if I leave the Tête Rousse hut early, it takes a solid 2 to 2.5 hours to get to this hut. That's climbing about 700 meters. And we just walk right in with the crampons and the rope, sit down, eat, drink. From here up, you're going to be moving slower and more aerobically. on that first section of the ridge, it's very anaerobic, where you kind of scramble and ha ha ha, and then stop and try to catch your breath. But from here up, you're just gonna get on that like diesel motor train and have a nice aerobic pace going. So the winds often pick up around dawn, as we know. And we end up putting on some more layers, eating and drinking, and head out the door to start our ascent up. Oh, it's about 400 odd meters from here. This is just under 4,000 meters. And we're going to ascend up to the Dome de Goutte, which is at 4,300 meters. This is the sunset. It's a great spot. If you end up there that first day, then you get the sunset from the Goutte. You can't be complaining. This is the old Goutte hut, which slept a considerable less amount of people. It was always problematic with people camping around it, but the gendarme had eliminated the camping, so there's not as much crowding on this route as there used to be 10 years ago, which is nice. We used to have to climb over tents and such. So they cleaned all that up, makes it a much more enjoyable experience for sure. So now, if depends on when you leave, this is essentially the positioning of that Goutte hut is about just on the other side of this here. So you come out of the Goutte and you walk this gorgeous ridge, and you're gonna start working your way up what's called the Dome de Goutte. It's a long glacial walk. We've been short roping as we go up the ridge, because we're using the short rope to protect people from falling off the mountain. But right now, we're worried about people falling in the mountain because we're on a glacier with snow. You're not sure where the crevasses are. So we use a rope and we extend out so that the counterbalance and the friction of the rope and the snow allow us to hold the fall. So we're essentially long lining up through some of this glaciated terrain to our first high point. And if you get there at sunrise, it's been a long climb so far from Tête Rousse. And yeah, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous place for sunrise. Hormonal cocktails are starting to feel pretty good right about here. Kind of getting your second wind whenever the sun comes up in the mountains. It's kind of a whole rejuvenation. It's the classic rosy fingers of dawn, right? The limitless possibilities here. So this is looking down at the Aiguille de Midi now over here. You can see that in the Aiguille Vert and the Dreux. This is the start of the Vallée Blanche, and this is where the Val des Arves is. And from the dome, you can finally see like the last part of the Mont Blanc. And you're like, okay, we can do this at this point. You got to go downhill a little bit into the dome, the Col de Dome here. And then essentially what we're going to be doing is working our way up to this Vallot shelter, which is an emergency shelter in the old remnants of an observation shelter here. And then from Chamonix, there are these two bumps on the ridge that look like a camel's hump. I think the old term, French term, is boss, and we have the Grand Boss and the Petit Boss. They have two bosses that are pretty steep and significant little hills to get up and over on your way up to the, this is the Tournai spur that comes up here, and then on to this last hill to the summit ridge. Obviously a windy day right here. You know, often indicative there is that cloud. It's not quite a lenticular, but it is being blown. The Vallot shelter is not a place where you go camp. It's definitely a place where you go in and change your clothes and get your layers dialed in and eat and drink. And they've eliminated people from sleeping there, and they've finally put in a bathroom as well, some over on the other side. So that's cleaned up considerable amount. So it's a great resource to have. It was, you know, overloved in the past, you might say. So they had to tighten up on it. So Vallot is kind of like, all right, if you made it there and you're feeling good, then you're thinking that you're going to be making it by this time. Leaving the Vallot, looking down into the Grand Balcony, this kind of drops way down into the Grand Moulin glacier. And I love this shot of the Maudit right here. You can really see that peak is gorgeous. you do the Trois Sommets route, you leave from the mid-station or from the Midi here, and you climb over the Tacpoul, the Maudit, and then the Blanc, which is a more technical route. All sorts of conditions you're going to experience here. We were long lining, and now we've got a slippery slope with exposure on either side. So you're going to want to shorten up your rope, keep your rope from people's feet. I've seen 2 parties slip on here and slide and get hurt. So that's definitely a place you want to keep your rope tight and off each other's feet as you work your way up over the Grand Boss. That's kind of shows you completely different. It can be either icy like the last photo, or sometimes these like awkward boot steps. So you just want to be, trying to move in balance and keep your footwork really good, because you're tired when you're coming down, something like that, and tired going up for sure. Gorgeous sunrise from the Ballot shelter on this trip. You can see the shadow cast off the peak of the Blanc right there. People ask, is it crowded on Mont Blanc? Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. This is kind of crowded, so that kind of gives you an idea of how many people you might experience. It's interesting at the huts, you can talk to people and see what kind of time frame and what kind of breakfast they're on, and sometimes you can try to get yourself purposely out of sync. Is a nice thing to try to orchestrate as well. Okay, here we are. This is on the left here is at the top of the Grand Boss, and on the right here, that's kind of up above the Tournai spur over here. And this slide's to remind me to tell you all that, it's either good or it ain't good. And when it's not a good situation, it's really imperative that before you did your trip that you're getting yourself some mountain insurance. I think it's important to have your rescue insurance before you come. And I think most countries' Alpine clubs, you can buy memberships from them and get yourself insurance through them, or you can buy it locally in the valley as well. And this is an example of the PGHM, like the angels from the sky. These folks are amazing with what they do here in the Alps, and particularly in this valley here with responding to people in the helicopter, lowering them down on a cable, long lining, and pulling people off the side of the mountain. It's pretty impressive, the response time and the professionalism and the training and the funding. So this person's being evacuated out of here for some reason, and that it's all good when the weather's good is what I'd add to that, because if this was bad weather, they wouldn't be flying and they wouldn't be taking him out. So when the weather is bad, you want to make sure that you're, and you got your self-sufficiency pants on. You're going to take care of yourself and manage your party, and you're going to make sure you use great judgment, expedition behavior to not get yourself in over your head, because that'd be a bummer to be in a place like this and have something go wrong in bad weather. So yeah, take it more conservative, stack the odds in your favor. And getting up, this is just after the Petit Boss. This is that Tournai spur, which is a route that comes up from the Italian side. You can see the track in the snow, which was right around in here. It's kind of the last hill up, looking down on the Dôme de Goûter here. That's the Ballot shelter on those rocks. This is down in the Miage Glacier, which comes out of the goes into the Val Veni over in Italy. In the classic summit ridge here. We've got Italy on the right, we've got France on the left, we've got sunrise out there over the Monte Rosa Massif, and Matterhorn is out there somewhere. It's a stunning spot to be for the morning. Let's look down the Val d'Aosta, and this is the peak of Puleio Mont Blanc right here. So when you climb routes on the south face of the Monte Bianco, as you'd say on that side, the classics of the Central Pillar of Freinet and the Inanamata and the Briard Ridge, you end up on top of this peak, and then you come over to the top of the Blanc. There's the Matterhorn out here. And this is one of those days, it was like me and 2 other, 4 of us on the summit of the Blanc. So some days it's crowded, some days it's not. I know that it all depends. But this is one of those special moments to have with folks. I've also had the summit of Mont Blanc with just myself and my climbing partner, which is special as well. And yeah, people are so stoked by the time they get here. It's like just as good as it gets. You know, again, it's people's stories of that make guides keep going. Some really cool folks out there. And so this guy's just totally elated, but I always loved what Ed Viester said with the summit's optional and getting down's mandatory. So you've got to leave enough in the tank. If you're heading down to the train, you're talking about 2,000 meters of descent. If you're heading down the Tête Russe, you're talking about 1680 meters of descent. And if you're going down to Goûter, you're talking 1,000. So you got to leave enough in the reserves to make sure you do that safely. Because the one thing I have learned about climbing mountains for the last 30 years of my life is not that many people really care what mountains you climb. So that's an important thing to realize when you're going to do these objectives, and you often have like so much caught up in it emotionally. I think it's important to realize that your guide is really there making decisions for your family. And though you contracted them and you're like, you're my man, they're really thinking about your partners and your kids and your family when they make your decisions, and trying to have that big picture situation of awareness. Because, you know, when you dance with the mountain always leads, is what Dolores LaChapelle always said. And I think that that's how a lot of guides operate. You know, a lot of mountains can be climbed and skied, but the timing is everything. So just trust that your guide has that and is making the good decisions. Because sometimes when you're so emotional, you're not able to make good decisions. Or when the hormonal cocktail is just kicking off so good, skiing powder or whatnot, you need the guide to kind of reel you in and be like, whoa, we can't do this because of this, or we can do this because of this. So when you get to the top of the mountain, eat, drink, and get ready for your descent, because it's going to be fairly long and involved whichever way you go. Here we are going down. I need to get these shots. So heading down the summit ridge, yes, like everyone is going to tell you, it's always harder going down than it is going up. So practice before you come on going down with crampons. So then it's a nice, safe descent. Just heading down the last part of the boss, through the col. Without a doubt, majority of the people say the hardest part of their Mont Blanc summit is this like about 100 meters, not even up to get back to the dome, mainly because of the sun aspect, and it's so hot at that time. And then we start running down the dome, and you never know what you're going to see. I'd love to know how far this dog got, but I was digging its glasses, so I had to take a picture of him, pulling the woman up. So that's pretty fun. And at this point, we're on a mission to get down with these folks. I went down to the train. So it's a long day. So we're going to nip into the Goûter to get a shot of some sugar, honestly. A little bit of Coke, a little bit of a treat, and eat some bread, and then start our descent. And I love the fact that I've climbed this thing multiple times in the dark. And then when I've come back down from the summit and I get here and I'm like on the porch, and we have to climb down off the porch to get onto these rocks. And the people are like, why are we going down here? I'm like, well, this is the way we went up. And they're like, no, we didn't come up here. I'm like, no, we did. So don't forget that this is a weight in your descent, 680 odd meters down the rib and across the couloir. And it's probably the most challenging movement skills that you're going to require all day. So be on it. So this is people talk about rockfall, and there's rockfall and there's rockfall in a scale of, not that bad to really bad. This isn't really that bad. I wouldn't want to be down there, but we had this happen a half a dozen times during the 2 hours it took us to get down to our crossing. And at that point, you're able to almost start seeing what the timing is. And then there's really bad stuff where you can Google like 2010 and 2014 YouTube rockfall couloir, and you'll see huge stuff. But this is kind of when people are saying, oh, there's rockfall. In the old days, it was an isolated stone here and there. Now we kind of have these events that are either like this, kind of avalanches of rocks, or even bigger that are like mass cavern incidents where parts of the mountain are falling off. So we had to, just manage yourself while you're going down. So you can see all that powdered dust there. Just a constant barrage. It starts in the rock at the top of the rocky couloir, and it just kind of goes down and off the cliffs there. So it kind of gets your attention, makes you realize where you are, and that you're not done until you're done. You got to get through that couloir. Okay, so then you get off the Mont Blanc, and what's next, right? So oftentimes after I've done Mont Blancs, I would happen to guess that the majority of the Mont Blancs I've done with people who have never used crampons before. And it's amazing to me at how successful they've been. It's really so cool to see people do things they didn't think they could do and jump in and do something completely new and different and be successful. It's a wonderful experience. And then after that, they're like, so what now can we do? So it's kind of like we get the Mont Blanc done. People are like, you mean there's other things that are kind of like that, but you don't have to walk as long or aren't as long and arduous and more like what we did in the warm up? And you're like, oh yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that. So that kind of, once people get that out of their system of doing the Mont Blanc, I feel like then they can like open up and start thinking about other routes, and it's really just endless possibilities in the Alps. But the Mont Blanc is definitely one of the finest feathers to get in your cap for sure. And this is on the last hill going up out of the Trois Saumons route. It was very windy that day. I remember that. Okay, so yeah, time's out. That's what it does. So this is Alpine climbing around Chamonix. I know 57 Hours has opportunities for folks to try to connect with guides all over the world. And just wanted to use a few minutes to talk about hiring a guide in Chamonix. And then Paritza, you can add some stuff maybe on what this is for you. But I think it's important when you contact a guide to try to develop a relationship with them and to realize that we're all here just to help you out and try to make the safest, best experience that you can have in the mountains and utilize the best of your time. And most of us spend at least 200 days a year in the mountains. So when people contact us to do something, they put a whole bunch of faith in us that we're going to do the best we can to give them the experience for them. So just being honest with them about your experience and your expectations and your adversity to risk and all that, so that they can craft you the type of experience that you want. And then there's all sorts of resources where you can find guides, 57 Hours being one of them. You can always contact guides directly as well. However it shakes out, I think it's important that you realize that there's some guides you meet that you might get along with and some that you don't. And people are people. So don't just generalize guides as guides and try to connect with them. There's definitely, every guide I've met is definitely interesting for sure. But not everyone's as interested. So I think that it depends on what you want. So it's worth spending a little time with them, buy them a beer, buy them a coffee, see if you work together well. And then build up to some of your experience. I mean, the relationship just gets better. The whole like connection and relationship with the cord. I climb with people for years, and maybe they never knew how to climb when they started 15 years ago, and now they're, climbing up over the Matterhorn. So I think that if you, go with a guide, you're probably going to end up having a good time. But take your time to pick the right guide that works for you. And I think that's easier to do when you connect with the guides independently. If you go with a big company, then you might not be able to talk to the guide directly. And if you do, say, hey, what's the guide's number? And can I call them directly? Because oftentimes we'll give you the straight answers. So we're here as a resource for sure. And
Cool. And that
Bruce,
I can add in, Mark, that we at 57 Hours also like work very closely with guides. And I mean, and with guiding companies as well, but we are very open and actually insist on clients talking with guides first. So even when you book an adventure or like book a guide, your guide will probably call you in the next day or two to discuss this. And I think that's very important to have this open line of communication, both to ensure that the day goes well for the client and the guide, but expectations are met. So if I can, Mark, I would advertise a bit your part as well. So thank you first. Thank you very much for the great webinar. I think the story is great, and it makes climbing Mont Blanc maybe a step closer to all of us who dream about that. And if you are interested in climbing with Mark this season, Mark, you sent me the dates that you have available. So Mark is available on July 30th, 31st, August 1st to 4th, August 18th to 20th, and August 26th to 30th. If you go to 57 Hours on our like Chamonix adventure, you can inquire and we'll get you in contact with Mark directly, or you can even save your spot and then Mark will call you back to arrange the details of your days together. So hopefully if you're all interested, or if you are there in the next month, reach out to 57 Hours and we'll connect you directly with Mark. And I hope he showed great knowledge of the area. And certainly, Mark, I think you know, it seems like you know every stone on the way to the Mont Blanc summit by now.
well, they move so often, it's hard to keep track of them.
Cool. Oh, sorry for this, but look, Mark, I think we can conclude with this. So anyone who's interested, again, go to 57hours.com and reach out. You can search for like Chamonix and just book a day. You can search for Mont Blanc and see how the itinerary of a descent would look like and what's included and all the technical details. I think we saw enough of the story now. And I think, Mark, we can move to the Q&A.
Sounds great.
Cool. I think actually the best might be to like, Mark, thanks, Mark. I think we can stop the screen share and maybe just answer all the questions live. So I'll basically go, we have like some 20, 30 questions. So let's, I think some.
Should I stop the screen share?
Yes, I think that would be best. So some details, some bigger questions, but Eric is asking how many hours from Guter Hut to summit, and Chamonix, like, so I think you already answered some of those details. So basically from Guter Hut to summit to Chamonix.
Oh,
that would be a lot, huh?
I call it 5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I tell the clients between 4 and 6 hours from Guter to summit. And then from the summit down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 hours to the train from the summit, without stopping and faffing around and everything.
Yeah. And we have Michael asking about luxury foods during the climb, but I have an impression, like knowing the huts, some huts do feel like a luxury when you have your food prepared. So
absolutely. I mean, you can feel quite at home saddling up to a 28 euro omelet at the Guter, for sure. But I think what he's talking about, I recommend my clients always bring what I call comfort food, like whether it be figs or dried fruit or bars or meat and cheese that they know they can eat all the time. Mont Blanc is high at 4,800 meters. You know, it's about 15,775 feet. And That's at the altitude where maybe you don't like eating everything, and you have a harder time processing some fatty foods, but it's not that high. It's not like 6,000-meter peaks, where that really happens. So I think it's important to bring things you know you can eat that's going to charge you up, but not like quick sugars. I think quick sugars make you crash. So I like to think of having maybe the sugar that then gets me to where the bread and the meat and the cheese kicks in. So it's kind of like the twiggy fire that gets me to where I can get into the carbs, more complex carbs, and then the fats and the protein. So whenever I stop on the Mont Blanc, I usually take a bite of meat and cheese and bread, and then I eat something like candy. Dried fruit is what it is for the sugar.
Nice. Thanks a lot. I think this is good advice. And then we have like some maybe a bit more general question. So we have like Dave asking what's the baseline fitness required? For instance, running 6 miles under an hour, or like doing a half marathon, or what would you say is the fitness you need for Mont Blanc?
I love that. That's a great question. I think just overall fitness for sure. I mean, if you can run 6 miles, that's great. I think where the fitness transfer gets lost is, I guess my analogy has always been, you might be a heart surgeon and do incredibly new cutting edge surgery, and you're supposed to do a presentation on it. So you're completely like dialed and know how to do it upside down the other and how to communicate it. But you're going to do a conference the next day, but you wake up in a different country and you're supposed to do the conference in Russian and you don't speak Russian. So you came prepared with all of the fitness and the skills, or the fitness and the knowledge in the head, but you don't have the skills to cramp on. So lots of times what makes people exhausted is not necessarily the output, but the output of learning something new. Walking in crampons is exhausting for people. So I think that training with crampon and flat foot technique when you walk helps train those muscles that you don't usually use. Because I've had so many ultra marathoners and triathletes and such, and now the CrossFit movement. And I think that with like the CrossFit training, people don't have a long enough endurance and potentially not the right skill technique. But the long distance runners, they could be super fit, but all of a sudden their calves or their hamstrings are blown out because they're not used to cramponing. So I would say take the time to get to know the technique and the movement. So then it's at the same par level as your fitness, if that makes sense. So I
Yeah.
love specific training. If you're going to try to climb hard, then you hang board. If you're going to try to climb mountains with crampons, then you train with crampons on.
Yeah.
So at home before I come here, I have a very steep hill with tall grass. I go up and down it with my crampons, my old crampons and crampon, and really work the muscle groups.
Cool. I think
So
that's the best advice. I actually had the similar experience last year. Being out for. I mean, I'm like I was mainly a sport climber, and I did some trad, but it was always like dry rock and all this stuff. And I had exactly the same experience. This walking in crampons was maybe not. Maybe I was already used to like handling gear, so it was not maybe difficult to do it, but it was difficult to do it efficiently. So I was really getting tired. Exactly as you said, it was literally like, wow, this is like as if I ran, I don't know, like hundreds of meters, and it's like you cross a few feet. So it really is.
yeah,
And then you get a hang of it, and it's easier. So I think that's a perfect advice. To basically
yeah,
do what you're about to do in the mountain below, so it's not new when you're up there. I think.
yeah. Doug Scott, the famous British mountaineer, always said, if you want to train for high altitude climbing, then go cut wet grass with a shitty lawnmower with a hangover. So, just working in deficit is good. Not having all the systems on board. Sometimes it's good to train without having all your water and all your food and all that stuff. I mean, not to the point where you're going to do harm to your body, but sometimes you just need to get on with it and can't be eating and drinking all the time in the
Yeah.
mountains.
And Dave is also having a follow-up question on this. So he's asking about the mileage from Rosé Hut to Summit and then from Summit to Guter Hut. I don't know if you maybe know that from the top of your head, what's the altitude and the distance covered.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, but I'm just going to speak the language that everyone in the world speaks except the United States of America. So from the Tet Rus Hut to the summit, back to the Tet Rus Hut is 1,600 meters and 50 up, 1,650 meters down, and it's over 4.5 kilometers. So if you did the conversion on that, it's, what is that? A couple miles, 7,000 odd feet almost.
Yeah.
But you just times it all by 3.28. And then to get from Tet Rus to the train, it's 3 kilometers and 800 meters. So when you go from the summit all the way down to the train, it's 2,500 meters downhill, which is it's a good day. You'll feel it the next day, but totally doable. Yeah.
I would bet, yeah. And we also have a few questions about the rockfall part where you said we have to cross. So do you have any suggestions for avoidance maneuvers when rockfall starts?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. What?
Any suggestions for avoidance maneuvers? So when basically what if there is a rockfall and then like you said already that somebody could watch over you, and is there anything you can advise if the rockfall actually starts to happen? What to do?
Well, I think it's important to have a plan with your team to make sure, like, hey, if we get a rock fall before halfway point, are we going to go back? Are we going to go forward? And that before you go, to make sure that, I mean, it all starts at the hut. Make sure your crampons are on appropriately. You know, I've had situations where I've run from rocks with clients and someone's crampon came off and I had to take the crampon off while we were dodging rocks. So make sure your equipment's on. Make sure the rope isn't somewhere where it's going to trip you. And of course, before all this, you need to be watching the weather pattern and keeping track of where that isotherm level is to make sure that it's staying freezing as low as possible. And in the summer, that freezing point is probably going to be around Gute Hut. It does go higher. So the rock fall, people often say, oh, if you go early in the day or in the middle of the night, there's less chance of rock fall. I'd say from my experience that the rocks can fall at any time. I gave the key things I saw were fog and wind, and any type of like real heavy precipitation is what causes rocks to fall. But before that, if you can have a lower freezing temperature, that's good. Using people to help. I climb with a radio. Lots of guides have a radio. And if I see a guide before they head down, I'll say, if they're leaving before I'm done in the Gute, I'll say, hey, I'll radio and say stop, go, or back, the commands that we use for the rock fall. So that if I'm like working my way where the start zone is and I see rock fall, if I say over the radio, stop or back or go, then they have a lot more time to respond down there than if they ask people on the side of the couloir. So trying to connect with people if you can, that helps. But once you're in there, then you need to do what I had just mentioned, come into the mountain prepared the appropriate techniques and skills to be able to utilize your crampon as if you're like the best Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly they've ever seen, and you need to dance your way across that couloir. So I think that's why it's important that guides want clients to come with the appropriate skills so that we don't have to be tied to folks that are stumbling in the couloir. So I guess if the rocks come, you just need to use your judgment call, whether you're going forward or back. There's really no place to hide from cover except right on the flanks. So I'd say, yeah, try to keep going. Looking up is problematic for people. I see lots of people tripping when they're looking up too much. That's why I like to just have people look at their feet and move. I think it's important to set the tone of being calm and being mellow before you decide to go across as well, so that people aren't moving all frantically. Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah.
Those are all the things you need to do
Yeah.
to take heed.
Yeah, and can I ask you, like, so Paulo is asking, and I'm actually wondering that as well. A small detail, like, what's the temperature expected on the top in the summer, and is it always, is there always snow on the top of Mont Blanc? I think, right? That's the name
That's
of the mountain as well.
yes. So when we have more annual snowfall than snow melt, then we're actively building glaciers. And on the top of Mont Blanc, it has more annual snowfall than snow melt, so it stays snow all summer. So we're always on snow. I've been up there in very cold temperatures with the wind chill factor. And I've been up there where people have stripped down and been naked and hot. So what I was saying about the 0 degree C, um, last summer or 2 summers ago now, 0 degree C was at 5,800 meters, 1,000 meters above Mont Blanc. So the summit of Mont Blanc then was probably 10 degrees Celsius. And I guess, yeah, 10 degrees is probably as warm as I've seen it on the summit, like literally sweating in a t-shirt. But then I've had a t-shirt, a mid-weight, a puffy, and a Gore-Tex shell on and be freezing. So those are the temperature swings from probably -10 with wind to 10 degrees with no wind and sunny. So I think it's important when you go in the mountains, usually you have to have layer systems so that you can be either in a t-shirt or a sun shirt and then build yourself all the way up so you have a nice big anorak or a duvet or a puffy jacket over you.
Sorry, is that me or some or okay?
Not me.
Sorry, then it was me probably. I'm really sorry. Somebody was ringing, but let's finish off with the question. So Austin is asking generally about, like, how to find the best guides. His reasoning is that the best guides get booked way in advance, and I think that was probably even more true like before COVID, and it's starting to get through as well. But I would like, what would you advise? Probably booking in advance, or like maybe going to the Mountain Guides Bureau in Chamonix. So what do you think is the best option to find a good guide?
I think that's all prerogative based. I'm not really sure how to answer that. I'd say that always contact them ahead of time is much better. So, for instance, my summers are usually booked in March. So, I think if you start connecting with guides for your summer trips during before they get real busy with their ski tour season, which happens mid-March. So, I'm trying to do bookings and maybe even because the Mont Blanc huts get booked in April, like first week of April for like Goûter and Tetris reservations. So around New Year's to March is when people usually contact me about their summer plans. So I'd say getting on it early is a good start. I'd say think about what nationality that you have a preference towards, perhaps, or what companies you want to support, and that each guide bureau, say like the British Mountain Guides, you can go to their website and it has a whole list of all their guides, or the American Mountain Guides Association has a whole list of their guides that you can contact directly. You can email the company de guides here in Chamonix. There's always the Society of Guides in Puleio. But if you're going to go to a different country, then sometimes you got to think about the language skills too. If you're primarily an English speaker, maybe you want to connect with an English guide, so you look for those bureaus, and so on and so forth. And 57 hours, you can connect with folks like them. There's a whole bunch of agencies now. So I'd say if you start early, then you can start your communication with them and then see how it works.
Yeah, I will say that we do work with certified guides only, and the other part that we also are very careful about. So we really build relationships with the guides, and what we also noticed, and I think Marek, you can probably confirm that usually, like, if you have a great guide that you know of, through recommendations you can reach the network of really good guides. I did notice that you guys are all very careful about who you recommend. which is usually a good sign of quality of somebody as a guide.
And sometimes it's a pairing with the right guide with the right people. Guides are always kind of client profiling and seeing what people are like. And sometimes maybe you want to match a person with this person or that person. Sometimes we just don't match. I mean, quite honestly, I've had people. We just spent 2 years living in Puleio and with my family and ski guiding, and people would call me up and say, "Oh, I want to get scared today and get on a rope," and I'd immediately be like, "Well, I'm not your guy. I can set you up with someone, but I'm not really." Because guides, when they commit to doing something, an assignment with their guest, then the guide has to manage what situation they put themselves in. So guides want to be kind of careful about what situations they put themselves in so that they have the best time and provide a good experience. So if someone comes in with those expectations and they don't match the guide's usually honest and be like, "Yeah, maybe you should talk to this person." So stuff
Cool.
like that
Thanks a lot.
happens.
No, no, this is a great answer. This is a great answer. And Lynn is asking about basically, I mean, she heard that the huts are fully booked for this season, but can you tell maybe just a bit more about booking huts and then maybe additionally booking huts last minute?
Yes. Yeah. So I have almost but given up trying to guide Mont Blanc because of the very challenging hut situation with reservations. So she is correct. You go on the website, it shows it's all booked for the summer. So you can call the hut keeper now 3 days before you think you want to come. And if they haven't had final confirmation and final pay from those bookings, they can get their beds open. The hut keepers in the Alps are making their money based on the food that they serve. So it doesn't necessarily behoove them to, take all these reservations and have no one show up and just sit around. Because if no one shows up and it looks like all the beds are booked, they're not making any money. So one way that you can circumvent the navigation on the computer is to go online 3 days before and look ahead for those last minute cancellations. Because you have to pay a deposit, but then you have to confirm. And if they don't get confirmations, then those beds need to be filled. So that's what I would do. Either get online 3 days before or call 3 days before and hope that you get a last minute. But when you're trying to run a business and want to have people, achieve their goals and their dreams, it's kind of a hard system to navigate.
Cool. I think, Mark, we have a few more questions. I don't know, about gear. I don't know if you want to go into that for Mont Blanc or, but basically
Gear.
the question is what's in your backpack when you go on a Mont Blanc ascent?
Oh, that's a great question. My backpack is very light and doesn't have a lot of straps on it to start with. And I don't even have a waist belt on it, so it's more comfortable with my harness. But in my pack, I carry a radio, an emergency radio, so I can call rescue immediately. You should have a phone with extra battery supplies so that you can call the rescue as well. And a first aid kit, of course. As well, in that first aid kit is a bivouac sack. I think the hardest thing, if someone has a problem while you're waiting for a helicopter, is body temperature management. You're negligent not having a duvet or a puffy jacket and a sack to put someone in. Anything works. Vapor barrier liners or the little Mylar emergency blankets. Solo makes great ones. So I definitely have that. And then I always have my puffy jacket. And for me, a puffy jacket goes over all my layers and zips up and doesn't have seams. So it's windproof, waterproof. It goes over my Gore-Tex coat and my soft shell jacket. I always like to have one extra layer for folks. So I usually have a small down vest. I basically run probabilities for a living. So I think about things where they have the greatest chance of happening, like gloves and mittens blown away. Pretty high chance of that happening. Sunglasses getting stepped on or broken or forgotten. Pretty high chance. So I always have an extra pair of glasses at the bottom of my rucksack. And I always have an extra pair of mitts because they'll fit anyone. So leather gloves are key on the Mont Blanc for dealing with the rusty, all burred up cables. So I take my folks to the hardware store here and we buy just your basic leather gloves. So those, a nice warm pair of gloves, and then the mitts. You got to have the sun visor. I go with a sun hood because I'm always hiding from the sun these days. The younger I get, the more the sun's affecting me, I think. So lots of sunscreen, lip balm. I wear the visor with the sun hat, the Patagonia like fly fishing shirts with the hood are amazing. They're SP50. And, the Mont Blanc is the one place I might wear long johns. But long johns are hard in the summer, so I cut them off at the knees. I use short johns. I'm a short john guy with my soft shells. And then for the upper part of the mountain, I have wind zip pants that you can zip up and put on over your crampons. So if you just totally got it wrong and you're cold, you can put those on, which is often the case at the Goûter hut or the Valo hut. And then up top, I'm wearing my t-shirt, a mid-weight, and a soft shell jacket, honestly, at the first part, because it's go, go, go. Your guide's kind of like the golden retriever when they're short roping you, short pitching, we're running back and forth and all around, and you try to stay steady. So I generate a ton of heat. So often just a couple light layers and a super small soft shell. But then when I get up on the glacier and start walking more slowly, I end up throwing on some more layers like a shell and then the duvet. So what else is in my pack? That's about it. Oh, and I carry a liter of water, of course, because I know I can get refreshments at the Goûter hut on the way down. But I keep, the tape, the extra headlamp batteries, the ibuprofen, all that stuff handy. I think that's it.
All right. Thanks a lot. As we are on an hour and a half in, I think maybe we can just sum up the Q&A part. And if anyone has more questions with Mark, please, we can follow up later. But I would sum up maybe, I think you said already that normally like Mont Blanc ascent is done over the course of 3 days with a 3-day prep. Right, so maybe you can just summarize that for people, because there is people who want to know like how much days in advance they need to come to Chamonix. So if you're maybe like a novice climber or like an intermediate climber, like how to plan like a Chamonix adventure and how many days you need to prepare, acclimatize, what do you need to do to train at home, and how much the process. Maybe we can just sum that up for people who really want to do it soon, if you can.
Okay, so I would recommend that depending upon where you come from in the world, if you have jet lag, then you need to add on extra time. If I have people from North America come over and we do that 3-day warm up, it literally takes them the first 3 days to kind of pull themselves out of jet lag. So if you are experiencing jet lag from wherever you come, then I would add 2 extra or 3 extra days at the beginning. To then ask your guide or talk to the people at the hotel or the Airbnb about where to go hike. Because Chamonix, you can ride the lift up, you can hike on these balcony traverses, very lovely trails with amazing views, and then ride the lift down to kind of ease into it. So I would recommend just taking advantage of the sightseeing with some mellow hikes, and then meet your guide to can start on the 3-day warm up with climbing either the Grand Paradiso or the Trion Plateau Traverse, or doing the 3 one-day trips from the Torino hut or the Planagui hut even can happen for a night, and then do your 3-day Mont Blanc ascent. But prior to coming, I would like spend between now and next season thinking about your cardiovascular training, and trying to do something aerobically 5 days a week, interspersed with strength training 3 days a week. That involves the muscles that you use walking uphill, stairs, squats, lunges, all that type of stuff. It's great to do in the gym for an hour or whatever, a few times a week, but it's really important that you get out and do long days, like an 8-hour day in the mountains, as part of your training every week, or bike riding or swimming, to get your cardio. So think about cardio and strength and try to get after it for the endurance part. Because if you just do CrossFit or Taekwondo, then you're probably going to bonk after 8 hours. Someone asked the question, how far from Tête Rousse to the summit and back to Tête Rousse? I'd say my fastest time on that has been maybe 9 hours, and my longest time has been 15. And remember, when guides are on the mountain on this type of summit day, we only stop usually where we transition our rope to change from glacier travel to short rope, or have to put crampons on or off. We're not stopping and picnicking. So it's often a solid 10 to 12 hour day. So think about that with your training.
Perfect.
Particularly with nutrition, right?
Sorry?
Particularly with your nutrition.
Yeah.
What foods you need to eat to continue going for 10 hours in the day.
Yeah. I think those are all great advices. And then let's say once the summit is actually happening, or like how would you, or even before it, when are like the decision points where you would decide whether to like, okay, actually go for the ascent? Am I ready? And if you're doing the ascent, like when do you decide to go back and things like that? Can you talk a little bit more about that? So basically when to bail and maybe postpone the goal to next season.
Great question. I think if you're with a guide in those first 3 days, they're going to be super transparent with you about whether or not you have a chance to go or not, particularly on this mountain because of the Grand Couloir. A guide may even, I've been in the situation where people have shown up for Mont Blanc, and after our 3 days, it's quite apparent they're not going to climb Mont Blanc. And usually they tell me. I'd say 99% of the time, the clients tell me there's no way I can do that. And you're like, great. Because managing expectations is really challenging as a mountain guide. So I would say that we'll know and we'll be transparent, because we don't want to go through the Grand Couloir with you if we don't think you're really going to have a chance. Because it's just in terms of probabilities, mountain guides don't tend to go do things that might not have a good reward if the probability of injury has a high consequence. So I think that if I think you're doing well and we're going to go, we go and see how you feel at Tête Rousse that night. And then that morning, hopefully you slept and feel good and you're ready to rock. But then I do tell people, if we don't get to the Goûter hut in 2.5 hours max, then we're not going to the summit. I think that if you don't have the fitness level and you're not acclimated well to get to the old Goûter was, I would say, 2 hours, 2:15 maybe, but then the new Goûter is a little further. So 2.5 hours there is pretty generous, I feel like. That shows me that you have the fitness level so that we can get back down. It depends on if you're going all the way down to Tête Rousse or you're going to stay at Goûter. You know, guides have to feel out the particular people they're climbing with to know if they can push it up and then end up back at Goûter. You can't count on the Goûter hut to just take you in and be like, oh, I'm so tired, I need to stay here. You know, in the case of an emergency, yes, you can, but don't be counting on that. So don't overjudge yourself. If it takes you 3.5 hours to go from Tête Rousse to Goûter, you're not fit enough to climb Mont Blanc safely. So you should probably just come back after you've trained harder.
Perfect. I think, Mark, this feels like a good point to end. You know, we went over the preparation, the actual ascent, and then went to know if you're maybe not fit enough. And I think you know, that's all the times when we maybe bailed on a goal should just motivate us to train harder for next season, because the one thing that at least I personally love about climbing is the mountains are I think it's John Muir, right? The mountains are waiting, or mountains are calling. I don't know the exact quote, but they're always there. So you can always try next season. You can always prepare better, get more skills, get more fitness, get more knowledge, and try again. So
Well,
it's always
you
good.
know, I always paraphrase Shakespeare with, you know, a mountain by any other name would climb just as sweet. And it's all the other mountains you climb on the way to the mountain you really want to climb that give you the skills and techniques so that when you do it, you're in the right place at the right time. You know, there's no reason to endanger the people on your rope because you think you want to do something. So when you're training, don't forget you can hire a guide and be like, hey, I want to climb Mont Blanc, so let's get timing crampons, and then we'll come up with something cool that we can go crampon around in all day and get you super dialed. So I think when you're thinking about training, don't forget about the technique part.
Perfect. Perfect. I think this sums it up perfectly. So I'll say again, thank you all for joining the webinar. We had over 100, I think 160 people at some point. So that's great. If you're interested to climb in Chamonix this season, you can always check 50centhours.com and inquire or book your spot. We'll connect you with Mark on the days he's available, which we already said August 1st to 4th, 18th to 20th, and 26th to 30, I think, if I got it correctly. If not, we also have a network of guides in place that we can connect you with that are all certified, and we'll certainly make sure that you talk about your objectives first. Mark, personally, thank you a lot as well. This was a great presentation, very insightful, and people loved it.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate you having me, and you know, thanks for joining this opportunity. We'll catch up with you soon.
For sure, for sure. And who knows, I think we should do a few more. I know we discussed about doing something that's maybe not the 10 most famous peaks in the world. So I think we certainly will have something cooking for next season.
Oh, cool.
For sure.
I'll look forward to it.
All right, Mark, thanks a lot. We'll end the live show now, and see you all in a week in a climbing and sailing in Sardinia webinar.
Excellent. Sweet. I'll be there.
All right, Mark. Thanks a lot. Bye.